From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. Polls have now closed in the Barbados elections, where earlier Prime Minister Frondell Stewart voted at the polling station at the Bailey's Primary School. The DLP leader said by all reports, voting was smooth and without incident. He also said long lines at the polls are a sign of a healthy democracy. Prime Minister Stewart said he was happy with the way both campaigns had been run.
Very good election period. Difference between Barbados and many other jurisdictions in other countries. Our election campaigns peaceful and violence-free. Yes, people express themselves vigorously and take up very strong positions on behalf of the political party they support, but it never transcends the perimeters of decency, and therefore our elections are very peaceful. The campaign was a very peaceful one. Both parties conducted, and all the parties conducted themselves, I thought, properly.
Earlier, our correspondent Laura Prada spoke to political leader of the Barbados Labour Party, Mia Motley, as she went to vote. She told Laura that she ran a good campaign, although she felt it could have been better, and that she's confident of a win.
At this stage today, I just want to focus on the election today and voting. But as we said, we've had to stabilize our country and our economy. We've separated out mission critical from transformational. And the most important thing is for us to stabilize our society and our economy. And at the same time, build a path for transformation, because we believe that Barbadians can do far better than we're doing now.
Now, for more on how the day has panned out, we now go live to our correspondent, Laura Prada, who's in Barbados covering the election. Hi, Laura, what's the latest on this election day now that the polls have closed?
Hi, Soini, nice to greet you. Indeed, we are now outside of a polling station that we were very early in the morning. At 6 o'clock, now it's 6:30, they closed the polling center and they made the announce. The presiding officer of this polling station stood here in the entrance of the polling station and proclaimed that it was closed, and now they completely they closed the doors, and now they're tidying up everything, because the presiding officer of the the polling center is going to be picked up by a bus and will take the ballots to the place where the ballots of the St. Michael's constituency are going to be counted. This will happen in the 30 constituencies of Barbados, and after they are done counting, they will be sharing their results with the media, national radio and TV, and that's how the final statement will be made, and afterwards we'll know exactly who is the winning party and who are the winning candidates of these general elections for the 30 constituencies, for the 30 seats at the Barbadian Parliament. These ballot boxes, after are counted, also after they are counted, people came close by, walkers came by, and they were sharing, asking questions, and we also talked with the presiding officer, and he was explaining us what was going to happen. This is what I have for now. We'll keep going around the city to know the specific results, and we will be sharing it with all of you.
Thank you so much for that report. That's our Laura Prada there in Barbados. Other news now. President Nicolas Maduro addressed the National Constituent Assembly after he was presented with his credentials to be president for the period 2019 to 2025. His second term officially begins on January 10th, when he will be officially sworn in. He called on legislators to renew their energy and to change their way of thinking to change Venezuela for the better. And he made a call for new ethics for the country. President Maduro said he's ready to start dialogue again with all sectors of society. He also called international companies from Europe, from Asia, from the Caribbean to come to Venezuela to forge new economic agreements. President Maduro also called for peace with Colombia, and whoever wins the elections in Colombia will be open to talks with the Venezuelan government. Now, President Maduro also made a call for unity among the Venezuelan people.
Let us listen to the voice and the silence of the people. They've been through tough times.
Con paciencia,
patiently,
con conciencia,
consciously,
que ha enfrentado dificultades de la
that
guerra,
have faced problems related to war, economic war, electric war, political war.
Now, Venezuela's President Maduro met with the former presidential candidate, Javier Bertucci, at the Miraflores Palace in the capital, Caracas, on Wednesday. Bertucci recognized the results of the election announced by the National Electoral Council, and he advocated for the national dialogue. The Minister of Communication, Jorge Rodriguez, said that his discussion with the president was fruitful, and he described it as the first of many. Now, Rodriguez also encouraged constructive action to find solutions for the political, economic, and social problems that Venezuela is experiencing.
President Nicolás Maduro's first proposal after being re-elected is to ask for an in-depth dialogue, where all sides can freely speak their opinion, but in a constructive way, and always looking for solutions for the economic, political, and social problems Venezuela is facing right now. We already had a successful meeting, hopefully the first of many. Former candidate and social leader Javier Bertucci shared his point of views during his meeting with President Nicolás Maduro.
Now, to take a deeper look at the situation in Venezuela, we're being joined live by our correspondent Ian Bruce in Caracas. Hello, Ian. Thank you so much for joining us. What did you take today from take away actually from President Maduro's speech today to the National Assembly?
Well, I think, Soini, President Maduro used this special session before the Constituent Assembly to lay out his vision of where he wants to take the country in the coming period, to make a pledge to the nation, if you like. And I think there are two things you mentioned, you touched on them briefly before, that are worth emphasizing there. He talked a lot about this need for a fundamental change in the way the government does his business. In fact, he said the government, the administration at all levels needs to change everything in the way it works in order to work better, except the fundamental objectives of the revolution to address poverty, to provide protection and security for the population. That would not change. He also emphasized this issue of national unity. He repeated over and over again the three words: reconciliation, dialogue, peace. And he said he wanted to talk to all sectors. He wanted to talk to the opposition candidates. He wants to talk to their supporters. He wants to talk to the opposition supporters who didn't vote. And he wants to talk to the unions, the members of the communes in the organized communities, as well as sectors of the private sector, small, medium-sized, and, as you also mentioned, larger foreign companies, to ensure that they can feel secure about investing in Venezuela. And in the context of that issue, that project of reconciliation, he said something interesting. I think this will be quite important news, possibly in the next day or two. He said he was going to ask the Truth Commission of the National Constituent Assembly to look at the possibility of returning to the freedom and therefore the possibility of engaging in peaceful politics some, at least, of those political figures, opposition activists who were arrested and detained last year for their role in promoting violence during the opposition protests. So that could be, and that of course has been one of the main issues the opposition has been putting forward for many, many months. So that could be an important issue in the coming day or two.
Now, Ian Bruce, you were just talking about the proposed national dialogue. Today is Thursday, the elections were on Sunday. How has the opposition been responding in the days since the electoral results and possibly to this national dialogue?
Well, the initial response was negative, essentially, Soini. You know, the sectors that didn't take part in the election, so they wouldn't have anything to do with it. Henry Falcon suggested the main opposition candidate said he wouldn't take part. But I think the situation definitely changed. That meeting on Wednesday night with Javier Bertucci, that came as a real surprise, and it gave some fillip, some momentum to Maduro's call for dialogue. Bertucci himself has now been quite positive about that possibility. So I mean, it is absolutely central, and the government sees it as central to their project. So we'll have to see now whether possibly Henry Falcon modifies his position and comes in on that dialogue process. But more importantly, of course, what other sectors of society are going to be involved in this? How will both the grassroots organizations be able to take part in that? And how will sectors who have identified with the opposition in the past be involved, and what will they contribute?
Thank you so much for that update. We've been talking to our Caracas correspondent, Ian Bruce, and we're going to take a short break now. So join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. As you heard earlier in the program, Venezuela's President Maduro also said on Thursday that he hopes the newly elected Colombian president on Sunday would re-establish diplomatic relations with Venezuela.
And I hope that the new president, whoever is elected, is brave enough to bring relations back with Colombia. Sadly, unfortunately, to Juan Manuel Santos, due to what he destroyed this in levels that have never been seen before in 200 years. I claim for the unity with Colombia, for respect of different models, but also for peace and for dialogue with Colombia. This is what I ask. I ask the Colombians for this. This is what I tell you, people from Venezuela as well.
Now, Colombia's elections on Sunday. Earlier, we spoke to Richard McCall. He's an independent journalist about what the outcome of the Colombian election might be, and in particular, what we could expect from either the right or left-wing new leadership when it comes to the current peace talks in Cuba between the government and the National Liberation Army.
Should the right-wing Ivan Duque, backed by former President Alvaro Uribe, should he come into power, we can expect that these peace talks will probably be, I would say, be cancelled. They will prefer to withdraw from the peace talks, that government, and start over with a more hardline set of rules. And it would include a disarming for the ELN, or, absolute unilateral ceasefire. Should Gustavo Petro get in, then we can expect more peace talks, more leeway, let's say, for these guerrilla groups, the leftist guerrilla groups.
And now social organizations in Colombia are speaking out against the heightened level of danger that young people face at the hands of paramilitary groups in the country.
Social and community leaders have denounced the presence of paramilitary groups in the Bolivar district of Bogota. The groups are believed to be recruiting young people for drug trafficking.
We have been denouncing this for decades. This is an ever-growing threat to our city. Various armed groups linked to drug trafficking took over the district of Bolívar. So far this year, 34 young people have been murdered, most of them between the ages of 14 and 34.
Local communities said that the situation has been worsening for years.
There are many issues after the demobilization of self-defense organizations led to the rise of new criminal gangs. This territory is being disputed by gangs, which leads to increasing levels of violence among young people. And because of limited employment opportunities, many end up being drawn into this war.
Communities and social leaders not only face a great wave of violence, but also suffer extreme neglect at the hands of the state, who willingly turns a blind eye to local drug trafficking.
This is getting out of hand. The government owes a great debt to Ciudad Bolívar.
Without an effective answer from the state, youth leaders have found other ways to prevent drug trafficking from claiming more lives.
We try to find young people that live on the streets who are using drugs, and we bring them in. We offer art and culture, we have dance classes, communication workshops, we do sports and guide them so that they can have a better education and also better employment.
Youth unemployment in Colombia is higher than unemployment among the rest of the population by at least 7%. That means many of these youngsters have nothing to do with their time.
The first way to combat this is to create an evenly distributed wealth with better productivity, while also encouraging tax policies that decentralize wealth. Inequality is a huge issue in Colombia. We are ranked as the 8th most unequal country in the world and 2nd in Latin America.
For the inhabitants of Ciudad Bolívar, the Colombia state is directly responsible for this situation.
If the government doesn't invest in education, these problems will continue. If the government doesn't offer work and education, people's lives will be worse than they are now. That is the root of all problems.
Local leaders know too well that despite their best efforts, a drastic change is needed. If that doesn't happen, the situation will only worsen.
In Cuba, 58 victims of last Friday's plane crash have been identified so far. This is according to the head of the Institute of Forensic Medicine, Sergio Rabel. 10 out of the 11 foreign victims have already been named, and Rabel acknowledged the non-stop work being done by the forensic team to finish the process as soon as possible, so as to ease the suffering of the families awaiting news. A plane with 13 passengers crashed last Friday, minutes after leaving the Jose Marti International Airport in Havana, where it was heading for the eastern city of Holguin. Only 2 people are said to have survived. There is an ongoing investigation to find out the cause of the accident.
58 bodies have been identified so far. In the case of foreigners, 2 Sahrawis have been identified, and we are working on the repatriation process with the embassy. Among the Mexican nationals, 6 have been identified. Relatives have arrived to provide information, and we are working on it. As soon as we find conclusive data, we will go to the authorities and relatives to report our findings. The 2 Argentine citizens have also been identified.
In Nicaragua, the national dialogue between the government of Daniel Ortega and the opposition was suspended on Wednesday due to the lack of consent between the parties. Institutions such as the Organization of American States and the Catholic Church said that early elections were the only way to restore peace, while Ortega's government said they are trying to organize a soft coup d'etat. Our correspondent Maria Jose Diaz from Managua brings us more.
On Wednesday, the national dialogue taking place in the Church of Our Lady of Fatima between the government, students and the private business sector was suspended. No agreements were reached between the parts, although the Episcopal Conference mediating the talks proposed to create a commission of 6 people to try to reach an agreement and resume the dialogues as fast as possible. The commission would be formed by 3 representatives of the government and 3 representatives from the other parties. Nicaragua's Foreign Minister Denis Moncada has warned that the agenda set for the dialogue is just a route to a coup d'etat. Meanwhile, demonstrations have continued around the country and left several injured. Opposition demonstrators are marching today again to demand a national strike. We will be informing you about when the dialogue will resume.
While the number of journalists killed in Mexico increases, a group of media professionals have decided to make a documentary to tell the story of their murdered colleagues, their struggles, and the government's failure to tackle these crimes.
During the presidency of Enrique Peña Nieto, Mexico has been identified by international organizations as one of the most dangerous countries for journalists. In the documentary No se mata la verdad, the story of some of the victims of this violence is told as a way to convey conditions under which Mexican journalists live.
Many people from all across the country are committed to informing the population through their work, and despite the harsh conditions in which we find ourselves, they are still here with their investigations to show society the truth about power.
The producers of Mirar Morir, a movie on the disappearance of the 43 students in Ayotzinapa, works to expose yet another case of violence, oppression, and intimidation in Mexico.
We already had a first cut before they killed Javier, and 1 month before, they killed Miroslava. It was very difficult to make the decision to resume the work of Javier and put it into the documentary.
More than 10 journalists were murdered during the production of the documentary, including Javier Valdez, one of the main voices in the film. Through testimonies, the authors show the importance of journalism currently in Mexico.
It is necessary to exhibit what is happening. My father said that the only tool we have as citizens is to inform, to let people know what the officials are doing, what they're stealing, the injustice that they commit, because otherwise things are not going to change.
43 journalists have been murdered during the 6 years in office served by President Enrique Peña Nieto, most of them working on issues concerning corruption and relationships between the government officials and organized crime. All these cases remain yet unsolved.
In Argentina, the grandmothers of Playa de Mayo, the human rights organization, have been nominated once again for the Nobel Peace Prize. This is the 6th time they have been nominated for their struggles to find their children and grandchildren kidnapped during Jorge Videla's military dictatorship. During Argentina's last dictatorship, an estimated 500 babies and small children were taken from political opponents who were then systematically disappeared.
This recognition honors us, of course. In any case, we are happy to be in our country with all those who love us, because the struggle continues and we do not feel alone. We are well accompanied. There is more and more solidarity, support and sympathy for the work we do.
Now, Ireland is gearing up for a historic referendum on Friday that could potentially liberalize one of the world's strictest abortion laws. Here's a look at the campaign from both sides.
Ireland's upcoming abortion referendum may be set to change the lives of the nation's women drastically. People across the country will be voting to decide whether to repeal the 8th Amendment of the Constitution, which gives equal right to life to both the fetus and mother. If there is a yes vote, the government will introduce legislation allowing abortion within 12 weeks of pregnancy. It's the first time in 35 years that a vote is taking place which could overhaul one of the world's strictest abortion laws, a decision that has deeply divided the Irish society. In the predominantly Catholic country, pro-life supporters have been adamantly campaigning that unborn babies deserve the right to life.
That we all have a right to life. Nobody would say to vote away somebody else's right to life. It's a human rights issue. The woman and the baby should have the same equal right to life.
I don't want abortion in Ireland on demand up to 12 weeks and then up to 6 months for healthy babies. It's a massacre. That's what it will be.
On the other hand, women like Amy Callahan want abortion to be legalized. The pain and suffering for this 35-year-old mother of one is still fresh from her trip to the UK last year. She was pregnant with her second child, but at 22 weeks, the doctor said the baby had a severe brain disease. She had no option than to travel to Britain to have an abortion.
But when it's you, you feel like a criminal. You feel like you're doing something wrong. And you just feel so sad. I think we were just so sad. And hurt by it, hurt by the whole country thinking that we were criminals.
9 Irish women live daily for abortions in the UK. And every day, 4 women import pills on the internet to induce termination, risking a 14-year jail term. Tomorrow is a decisive day, which can open a new window for women who want to be in control of their bodies. and the worldwide Irish diaspora are leaving no stone unturned for this historic day. Many are rushing to Ireland from wherever they are to cast their vote.
Syrian citizens have gathered in Al-Hajar al-Aswad as government troops and security forces raised a national flag over the newly liberated South Damascus suburb. This comes days after the Syrian Arab Army reportedly concluded its 7-year-long war with the self-proclaimed Islamic State group earlier this week. Palestinian flags were also raised in an act of solidarity. And staying in Syria, the government has found yet more foreign military hardware in areas newly liberated from armed insurgents. Our Syria correspondent Hisham Wanus has the latest.
Damascus, since the beginning of the Syrian crisis in 2011, has denounced its Western, European, regional and Arab counterparts for their support of extremist armed groups in Syria. This support comes in logistical, financial, political and military forms. Its goal is the continuation of the Syrian conflict and the weakening or defeat of the government. It is unsurprising then that Syrian government forces have found weapons caches consisting primarily of hardware produced by NATO countries in territories newly liberated from the Islamic State group and other armed extremists. It goes without saying that the majority of the Syrian army's hardware is either Russian-made or came from the former Soviet Union, so this clearly highlights that foreign powers are arming the insurgency.
The discovery of these weapons affirms the accusations of Damascus towards us proxy states, such as the Persian Gulf monarchies, alongside of other countries, in their support of terrorist groups in Syria.
Both the Russian Center for Reconciliation and Syrian authorities have revealed that this month, pro-government forces discovered various military hardware items such as gas masks, US missiles, machine guns, and Israeli telecommunication equipment.
This equipment, used by rebels, demonstrates that the armed groups were the ones that used toxins in different parts of the country. Nonetheless, this was ignored and without investigation. The Syrian army was accused of the supposed attacks with toxic chemicals.
In territories previously under the control of armed extremists, such as the Islamic State group, underground complexes with explosives were found, others with advanced medical facilities, as well as detention centers for Syrian citizens. Meanwhile, the government continues to prevail in its fight against armed insurgents, and it is likely that with this advance, yet more imported weapons will be found.
U.S. President Donald Trump has called off his much-anticipated summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, scheduled for June 12th in Singapore. In a letter released by the White House, Trump says, quote, "It is inappropriate at this time to have this long-planned meeting." The decision comes after days of accusations and tension between the U.S. and the North Korean administrations. However, in the letter, Trump also told Kim that someday I look very much forward to meeting you. And finally, we take you now to Caracas for live pictures of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who is presenting himself officially to the military so that the army can ratify his commitment to the presidency.
De carácter popular, democrática, igualitaria, libertaria. Qué bello suena, libertaria, sí, libertaria. Aquí estoy. Lleno de certezas del futuro de nuestra patria. Un país que tenga una Fuerza Armada Nacional Bolivariana como la que tiene Venezuela es capaz de pasar cualquier prueba.
And with those live images, we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisiertv.net/English. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Talisier English, I'm Sonia Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
We are always there tracking the news. We seek